Chapter 41, The World Under Assassin Rules. Not long after he started driving, Li Ming's phone pinged. Mission complete, $10,000 deposited. He nodded in satisfaction. 10,000 wasn't a fortune for killing a gang leader, but it wasn't chump change either. It was, of course, far less than the $2 million starting bounty John Wick would later face. But in the assassin world, reputation and bounties were their own kind of legend. Along with the payment came a prompt from the space. Initial mission, evade pursuit completed. Reward, 500 points, 3 free attribute points. Main mission activated. Main mission, the path of the assassin. Mission requirement, within 3 months, increase your reputation as an assassin. Mission evaluation will be based on your final reputation. Note, mission is considered complete only if evaluation reaches C rank. He hadn't finished digesting the attributes from his original body, so he decided not to spend the free points yet. He also noticed the space's tone had turned cold and mechanical again. It seemed that after entering this mission world, the Abyss no longer had control. Li Ming focused on the main mission. This was another open-ended task, and he understood immediately that getting an S rank like he'd managed in Gotham would be extremely difficult. To raise his reputation, he'd have to take bounties and kill, but he wasn't John Wick. He wasn't going to go on a rampage through the assassin world. The key, as always, lay with the protagonist. After Gotham, Li Ming grasped the value of writing the plot. In Gotham, a different player like Chen Haonan might hack and stab his way from the police station to Arkham and still fail to get a passing evaluation, but Li Ming had managed to bluff his way to the position of King of Gotham in 6 months. The John Wick world, however, moved much faster. So far, Li Ming hadn't found any bounties tied to John Wick in his original body's memories, which suggested this was before John's story began. Unlike Gotham, where there was time to maneuver, the John Wick plot was compressed. The combined events of the first 3 films take less than half a month. The gap between the third and fourth parts is longer, around 6 months, so all 4 plots together span only 7 or 8 months. Once John's story starts, he would accomplish a series of world-shaking deeds in a very short time, breaking the Continental's rules, openly defying the High Table, assassinating leaders of the organization. If Li Ming could align himself with John, reputational gains would come fast. But the risks were obvious. Standing alongside John would draw the assassin world's wrath. Standing opposed to him would be worse. Li Ming thought through the idea of taking John down. Aside from a sneak attack, he couldn't come up with a realistic plan, and he didn't want to be the one to confront John anyway. For now, the mission was a baseline goal. The more important objective was to improve himself as much as possible in a short time. He hadn't forgotten the Abyss's special privilege, analysis. If he could convert knowledge into skill, maybe, just as Alfred had trained him in combat in Gotham, he could learn from John Wick. John's skill level sat at the human peak. Li Ming figured most portrayals of Batman, without armor, might not beat John. So he thought most about how to get John to teach him. Even if the plot collapsed, learning from John would let him finish the mission on his own strength. Reputation plus 100. The space's sudden prompt startled Li Ming so much he slammed on the brakes. Reputation increased. It looked like He Dajuang's body had been discovered. He restarted the car, secretly pleased. And indeed, his reputation had risen considerably. At the scene, belated police officers were circling the battlefield where He Dajuang had fallen. "My God, what is this?" one officer exclaimed, and the others murmured in agreement. Is this a cold weapon battlefield? Gang infighting? No. The captain's decisive voice cut through the speculation. All the dead are Nigo and his men. They're from the same family. This can't be internal infighting. He opened his phone. Doug was a wanted man. Just now, somebody submitted completion for Doug's bounty. In the John Wick world, the police were largely ornamental. Most real power lay with the High Table. Local custom was even more extreme here than in Gotham. This was practically an assassin world. You never knew when the mom beside you pushing a stroller would pull a gun out of it. An assassin, some officers scoffed. What kind of assassin could do this? Maybe just lucky gang violence. The captain shook his head. The bounty was posted only yesterday. That's not a coincidence. Even if it were infighting, an assassin must be behind it. The officers nodded, convinced. Who completed the bounty? A Chinese assassin named Li Ming. The captain glanced at his phone. The name passed from mouth to mouth. One of them studied the mutilated bodies and muttered, "He's like a wizard." Yeah, like a wizard. In a world saturated with killers, top assassins were venerated. John Wick, wherever he went, was recognized and treated with respect. Even those who came to hunt him were proud to face him. If Gotham was a paradise for crime, the John Wick world was an assassin's playground. Its rules were ruthless and pragmatic. Influential figures frequented luxury venues and controlled much of the world's resources, and when problems arose, they didn't sue. They posted a bounty. Business wars and legal proceedings mattered little. The solution was to eliminate the problem. The ordinary people here had either grown up with violence or adapted to it. They didn't even flinch when a gunfight broke out. Assassins themselves were oddly fastidious. Even while fighting for their lives, they preferred melee over firearms, and if they shot, it would be with small-caliber weapons, never big guns, even at the risk of dying. They were assassins who fought like soldiers, who saw death as a return home. Every world has its character, and the assassin world's was polished savagery. Li Ming smirked at the thought. If he'd met John in a straight-up fight, he might have just pulled out a rocket launcher already. The point was to avoid playing fair. Thanks to friends 2201-48763, 2021-030110-656485712, Wan Yuan Tianzun, Obsessed Muddlehead, and MJ New, 7 great masters for your monthly ticket support. It's New Year. Ha ha! Chapter 42, Disrupting the Plot. Wizard? At an Assassin World safe house, Li Ming toyed with the gold coin the manager had just handed him and repeated the manager's address with a faint smile. He hadn't expected his name to spread this fast. Yes, Wizard. The scene at Doug's place, 23 dead, not a single survivor. Truly shocking. The manager spoke with a mix of awe and unease. Even the most seasoned operators couldn't figure out how Li Ming had made tightly knit gang members turn on one another. Whatever you did, it's as if a wizard enchanted their minds. The manager bowed respectfully. Cities had networks of these safe houses where assassins took bounties and collected rewards. Because many operatives avoided phones or preferred face-to-face dealings, offline channels like this were common. May I? The manager hesitated, then asked cautiously, "Ask what you used to do it. The human heart is a slippery thing." Li Ming only smiled and didn't answer. Ambiguity worked best in moments like this. People would supply the rest themselves. "Keep it up, Mr. Wizard," the manager said, clearly impressed. Instead of fear, the massacre had won Li Ming admirers. They wouldn't call it supernatural. They'd invent clever strategies to explain it, and those who knew would spread the story. His reputation in the assassin world had jumped to 328 points. Outside, Li Ming flipped the gold coin once. It sparkled in the sun and landed back in his palm. In the assassin world, gold coins weren't ordinary currency. Each coin bought a single service, anything from medical care, weapons, and equipment to a simple drink. One coin could even hire an assassin. He'd been handed one as a reward and already knew how he'd spend it. 2 hours later, in the suburbs of New York. "That's it, John's house," Aurelio said, pointing at a detached home ahead. He owned a nearby auto shop, was secretly tied to the high table, and most importantly, had a good relationship with John Wick. Li Ming had spent his coin on Aurelio, directions, transport, and a little gear. "You know John has retired, right?" Aurelio added. Even though he was a friend of John, a gold coin was a gold coin. Besides, once Li Ming showed up, the neighborhood would talk. "I know. I don't mean him harm," Li Ming said, glancing at the house. "I'm a fan." "We all are," Aurelio shrugged. "But your timing. John lost his wife a few days ago. The funeral just finished. He's probably not in the mood for visitors." "A few days ago?" Li Ming's voice was casual, but inside he was pleased. Perfect timing. John had given up everything to leave the assassin life for his wife. The story's timeline began a few days after her death. If Li Ming had waited, he'd missed the window for the plan he'd been forming on the way over. The gold coin had been well spent. "Thanks, Aurelio." Li Ming took the coin back out of his pocket and handed it over. Aurelio drove off. Li Ming stayed back, circling the property at a distance and studying it for an entry point. According to the plot, within the next day or two, Yusef, son of Hugo Tarasov, the area's most powerful gang boss, would set his sights on John's car, an old Ford Mustang John cherished. Yusef would try to buy it, be refused, and then that night lead men to break into John's house, ambush John, steal the Mustang, and worst of all, kill John's dog. John, already raw from grief, would snap. The night demon of the assassin world would rise again. To Li Ming, two things in the John Wick world were priceless. First, the unique bulletproof suit, black tech armor that left no bullet marks, resisted impacts and falls, and kept dust out. A gold coin could get him that. Second, John Wick's combat skill set. Li Ming carried the analysis privilege from the Abyss. If John agreed to teach, Li Ming could parse and transform a great number of John's techniques, drastically boosting his own combat abilities. But timing was tight. Once John re-emerged, he would be swamped with pursuers and vengeance. Li Ming wouldn't get the focused teaching he wanted. So he planned a preemptive move: stop the inciting incident. If he could prevent Yusef's break-in, save the dog and the Mustang, John wouldn't be driven back into the world by rage. Instead, he'd owe someone a debt. John would remember whoever saved what little was left of his life, and Li Ming could ask for instruction while gratitude still lingered. It was the safest path to acquiring John's skills. As for breaking the original plot, Li Ming didn't think that was a problem. In Gotham, following the script often worked to your advantage. In John Wick's world, sometimes the greatest benefit came from removing the plot entirely. For a Reincarnator, whether to follow or disrupt the storyline depends only on which option yields the most advantage. Chapter 43. John, you can kill me, but not my dog. Dusk had barely settled when Li Ming saw a Ford Mustang pull up at the house in the distance. Jonathan was back. Li Ming stretched and loosened his muscles but didn't approach immediately. First impressions mattered. He planned to wait until Jonathan was truly in danger before revealing himself. He set an alarm for 1 a.m., lay down in the car, and reviewed the memory library in his head. According to what he remembered, the attack would happen around 1:41. He had to be ready by then. Staying awake all night without a plan would only leave him exhausted and ineffective. Beep. The alarm woke him. He sat up, used a wet wipe to clear his face, holstered his pistol, and slipped out of the car. With his current physique at level 16, the cool pre-dawn air didn't bother him. He crouched in a pre-selected spot among the trees that hid him from view and waited. After half an hour of silence, 4 figures in black, faces masked, slipped across the lawn toward Jonathan's house. Li Ming watched them thread through the darkness and followed at a distance. They fanned out, climbed into the garden, and entered through a side door. The leader was Yusef, the spoiled son of the gang boss Hugo, flanked by 3 thugs. They tore through the rooms, clearly searching for car keys. Soon 3 of them formed a line at the foot of the stairs while another hid behind. They'd heard Jonathan coming. The little beagle downstairs alerted him, and when Jonathan went to check, he found 3 men waiting below. He knew something was wrong, but before he could react, the man behind him swung a baseball bat into the back of his head. Jonathan crumpled to the floor. A second blow landed as one thug hurled the bat to Yusef, who finished the job. Jonathan didn't stand a chance. Li Ming watched, grim. Jonathan had been a top-tier assassin, but he'd retired 4 or 5 years ago and had let himself slip out of shape spending time with his wife. That, plus the surprise blow to the skull, left him helpless. The intruders began trashing the place in search of car keys. The beagle whimpered and drew Yusef's irritation. "Kill that damn dog!" Yusef barked. Blood smeared Jonathan's face as he tried to turn his head toward the sound, hoping the dog could get away. The little animal bolted, but was cornered in front of the glass garden door. The thug raised the bat to smash the dog's skull. Bang! A gunshot cracked. The thug with the bat dropped, and the glass door exploded inward. The dog bolted through the broken pane and disappeared into the night. Jonathan felt a rush of relief and tried to look up to see who had saved him. Li Ming had been waiting for this exact moment. He'd timed his shot so that the dog would be saved at the last instant. The pain of almost losing it would amplify the gratitude when the dog was recovered. That surge of debt would make Jonathan more receptive to Li Ming's future request. He was nothing if not deliberate in his manipulations. Who's there? Yusef panicked and dived for cover, peering into the dark garden. He didn't care whether the fallen thug was dead. You, go check! Yusef barked at one of his men. The subordinate hesitated, then crept forward. As he reached a sofa, a bullet thudded into the cushion and sent feathers and stuffing into his face. Ah! He screamed and backed away, sure it was a warning shot. Yusef urged him, but he wouldn't advance. Li Ming cursed under his breath. He'd missed at 20 meters. The shot had only been meant as a warning, but he still needed to practice his aim. Another thug whimpered, "Yusef, we don't have guns. Let's get out of here." Yusef hesitated, then gave the order to run. "What about Yuri?" one of them asked, pointing to the man who'd been shot and dropped. "Forget him!" Yusef yelled. But after 2 steps, he paused, thinking of the trouble a captured accomplice might cause. He turned back and ordered the other 2 to carry Yuri away. Li Ming let them go. He did not want to risk a firefight. The gang fled, leaving the house in ruins. After confirming they were gone, Li Ming stowed his pistol and entered through the shattered garden door. His boots crunched on glass. Jonathan lay on the floor, head tilted back. He managed to open one eye long enough to see a pair of leather shoes before his vision clouded and he passed out. The blow to the back of the head and the sudden safety had triggered his brain's protective shutdown. When Jonathan came to, the house had been tidied a little. His savior sat on the sofa, calmly petting the beagle. "You're awake," Li Ming said, setting the dog down. The beagle leapt to Jonathan and snuggled against him. Jonathan buried his face in its fur, joy plainly written on him. "I did a quick check. You fainted, but you're not seriously injured, so I didn't wake you," Li Ming told him as he approached. "Thank you," Jonathan said, gratitude and confusion mixing in his gaze. He didn't know how to address his rescuer. "Call me Lee," the man offered. "Lee, thank you for saving my life and my dog." Jonathan cradled the beagle like it was his most precious possession. If the gang had gotten away with the car, they might have silenced him to cover their tracks. "It was a coincidence for me," Li Ming replied smoothly. "Actually, I came here to see you today." At the mention of his real name, a flash of caution crossed Jonathan's face. Most people didn't know his past. "Mr. Wick?" Li Ming bowed his head briefly, then smiled. "You're my idol, Mr. Wick. That's why I asked Aurelio to bring me here." Aurelio was an old friend of Jonathan's, which eased the older man's mistrust. "Just call me Jonathan," he said slowly. Lee swallowed and then asked plainly, "May I ask why you came, Lee?" "I want you to teach me how to fight," Lee said without hesitation. Jonathan regarded him for a long moment, the evening light cutting across the room. Outside, the night settled back over the garden, broken only by the distant hum of a city that hadn't noticed the small storm that had passed through this house. Chapter 44. Haven't I said this before? I've been retired for a long time. John answered without thinking. He had been out of the assassin world for years, and an instinctive resistance to it still lingered. Li Ming put a soothing hand on the table. "I don't mean for you to go back into the business, Jonathan," he said. "Just teach me a few skills. It won't affect anyone else." John shook his head. "Sorry, Lee. I'm not in a great state to be anyone's teacher these days." John forced a bitter smile. He was grown out into a full beard, and his hair stuck every which way, decadent, worn. People who had known him when he was younger could still see the handsome man under it all. Li Ming's voice softened. "I heard. I'm very sorry. She must have been a good wife." "She was my angel," John said, his voice flat with certainty. Li Ming nodded. "I understand how that feels. When I lost my own angel, I was in pain too." John stared at him. Li Ming went on. "I became an orphan when I was 8. I lived on the streets until the director of a welfare home found me and took me in. He treated me well. He gave me a home and warmth. Without him, I would have died." Li Ming's tone was earnest. "He kept me from becoming a walking corpse." John couldn't help but nod. That was how he had felt when he met his wife. The story made him look at Li Ming with a new kind of affection. But 4 years later, the director died. At that moment, I thought the sky had fallen. Li Ming mentioned the original plot of the world offhandedly, and John felt his chest tighten as the memory of his own loss came up. His world had collapsed in a different way, but the pain was similar. Li Ming leaned forward. "Before he died, he told me something I never forgot. He paused, weaving a detail that wasn't true, an invention to draw John in. John listened tightly. The director said he hoped I'd learn to live well even without him. I think your wife wanted the same for you, Jonathan. John pictured his wife's last message when she sent the puppy, the little note meant to pull him out of his slump. He nodded. Yes. So I tried to cheer myself up, the only way I knew how, Li Ming said, baiting him. How'd you do it? John had taken the bait. How? Find something to do. Distract yourself. Li Ming's voice was steady. John looked skeptical. Does that actually work? Taking your mind off the worst of it can make facing the bad things easier. That's how I got through it, Li Ming finished, speaking with an authority that hinted at more than mere opinion. John felt a smile, small, painful, real, break through. He'd heard words like that before. It even reminded him of someone else. For a second, he thought of Bruce muttering, "Why do my ears feel itchy?" The realization hit him. Li Ming had used the same line elsewhere. Then Li Ming said the words John had been thinking. "Teach me," Li Ming said simply. John, who'd been so guarded, found himself laughing, the sound taking some of the edge off his grief. It doesn't have to be long. Half a month will do. John opened his mouth to refuse, but Li Ming had said enough to make refusal hard. He'd been cold, John knew, but Li Ming had saved him in his own way and shared a similar wound. He was special in John's eyes now. Okay, John finally said. He added immediately, as if to set expectations, but in half a month you won't learn everything. It's fine. I'll do my best to learn. Li Ming wasn't worried. With his ability, analysis, he would absorb instruction at an extraordinary speed. The reason he insisted on only half a month wasn't reluctance. It was the plot. The first part of the story culminated with John's confrontation with gang boss Hugo and Hugo's defeat. After that, the second part moved quickly. Santino, an ambitious Italian, used a blood oath to drag John out of retirement to murder his own sister in a scheme for a high table seat. A blood oath among assassins was unbreakable. When John had once helped Santino, he had pledged one unconditional favor. The second pursuit was inevitable. There were only about 10 days between the first and second parts, which meant Li Ming only had a short window to learn before the world forced events forward. With the terms settled, Li Ming moved into John's house. He couldn't help admiring his luck. He'd been welcome into the homes of protagonists in both worlds he'd visited. The next day, after tidying the place, John began to teach. He had already arranged for people to look into the identities of the thugs from the night before. John was angry, but there had been no real loss. Killing them wasn't necessary. He focused instead on teaching, starting with combat at Li Ming's request. Li Ming already had a foundation, and John expected quick progress. But even he was surprised by how fast Li Ming picked things up. A few explanations, and Li Ming could apply the techniques. Only Li Ming knew why. Analysis made everything snap into place. While training went on, the men who'd retreated that night were scrambling. Yusuf fled back to his father's base. Yuri, shot by Li Ming, had miraculously survived, but the news that one of Yusuf's men had been shot still found its way up the chain to Hugo. "Where were you last night?" Hugo asked when his son came in, his voice flat as he poured a glass of whiskey and slid it toward Yusuf. The boy was still shaken. Hugo wanted him steady. "Nothing, father. A small accident. I can handle it," Yusuf muttered. He didn't want to talk about the humiliation. He was already planning to bring more men to take revenge that night. Hugo had dealt ruthlessly with the gangs around him. Nothing should have posed a threat. Before he could probe further, his phone rang. "Aurelio, what is it?" "Hugo, your son caused big trouble." Aurelio's voice on the line was urgent. "He took men to John Wick's house last night to try and steal his car. They almost killed his dog." Hugo felt the air go cold. Damn it. He had suspected Yusuf had been involved when John mentioned the attack, but he hadn't told him yet. A man saved John last night. John was injured, but he didn't lose anything serious. I advise you explain this to John proactively. "Thank you, Aurelio." Hugo let out the breath he'd been holding. Hearing that there were no fatalities lessened the blow. "I owe you." Yusuf stared between his father and the phone, dread rising like bile. "Father, who called?" The question died in his throat as Hugo's fist cracked down. Chapter 45. Turning hostility into friendship. After severely punishing the insolent Yusuf, Hugo introduced him to John. That man used to work for us, Hugo said as he poured himself a drink to steady his nerves. He was the best of us. They called him Baba Yaga, someone murmured. Yusef recognized the name from Russian folklore, then used a more common term. The boogeyman? He's worse than the boogeyman, Hugo said gravely. He's the one you send to kill the boogeyman. John, meanwhile, was showing Li Ming how to use improvised weapons. Take a branch, he said, picking up a broken twig. It looks fragile, but in the right hands it can be lethal, especially the tip. He demonstrated the motions with calm precision. John is focused, he keeps his word, and his will doesn't break, Hugo told his son as he approached. You don't have any of those qualities. He shook his head. I once saw him kill 3 men in a bar using only a pencil. He killed them with a damn pencil? Li Ming repeated in disbelief. Li Ming managed 2 moves before John had the branch pressed against his throat, and John had no intention of killing. Fear crawled through Yusef. He'd heard his father's reputation and didn't think he'd lie. He's twice as dangerous as the deadliest assassin you can imagine, Yusef whispered. Hugo, who knew John's skills better than anyone, felt grateful that someone had intervened with a shot the night before. Otherwise, his old enemies would have finished them off. What do we do now? His son asked. Make a call, Hugo said, glancing at his disappointing son and sighing. The phone rang. Li Ming, sprawled on the lawn and gasping for air, pointed at the house. Give me a break, he panted. John nodded, started toward the house, and Daisy, his little beagle, trotted after him. There might be clues from last night. Li Ming called after him. They'll probably come crawling back, begging for those punks. Have you thought about how to respond? Li Ming added. Make them pay. How? Kill them all? John asked. What if their side has a powerful backer? Li Ming countered. Then you'll be back in the same quagmire. If that's the case, Daisy won't live in peace either. John looked at the dog, hesitated, then nodded. He wasn't enraged enough to want to slaughter everyone. If the other side had influential friends, it might be smarter to give them face and use the favor later. Inside, John picked up when the phone rang on the second tone. Hello, John, Hugo said, relieved. Hugo? John answered, surprised to hear from his old employer. I'm calling to ask your forgiveness, Hugo said immediately. He knew John didn't waste words, so he chose his carefully. I heard about last night. I'm very sorry. It was my son. He's been punished, Hugo added. Yusef Tarasov, John asked. That scoundrel, Hugo admitted, humbled by the chance for a reprieve. John, we both want to live quietly. Please do me a favor and let him go. There was a pause. John's voice was measured when he finally replied, You owe me one. Of course, Hugo answered quickly. He started to say more, but the line went dead. John had hung up. Well, same as always, Hugo muttered, already used to John's brevity. Li Ming hadn't rested long before John reappeared. How did it go? He asked. Yusef Tarasov, John said. Hugo's son? Li Ming blinked. You know him too? John was mildly surprised that Li Ming knew the name. As I said, you're my idol, Li Ming replied with an embarrassed grin. I've looked into a lot of things. Even John couldn't help a flicker of amusement at the praise. He was respected in the assassin world, but most of them kept their distance and their pride. Li Ming, a reincarnator from another life, fawned openly, and it was working. Li Ming wasn't flattering for its own sake. He was trying to get something genuinely useful. Do you have any exclusive techniques you can teach me? Li Ming asked. Time was short, and he wanted John's essentials. John hesitated. If I had to name my method, it's about making the right judgment. That's what keeps you calm and composed in a fight. Li Ming immediately thought of the time John faced 2 pursuers with all of them out of bullets. John calmly reloaded and shot them before they could. John always made the right choices to turn the tide, and that discernment was his defining skill. It comes from experience and knowledge, John continued. It's not something you can teach with words. Li Ming believed him. Making split-second correct decisions in combat sounded simple, but without the background, gun knowledge, timing, situational awareness, it wasn't possible. Fortunately, Li Ming had a way to bridge the gap. Teach me to judge correctly, Li Ming insisted. Please. John nodded. Over the next several days, he poured everything he could into training Li Ming. He drilled judgment calls, weapon handling, situational assessment, everything he lived by. On the sixth day, Li Ming's device chimed. Analysis complete. Analysis successful. Converted into skill. Acquired. John Wick Combat Template Lord 3. Chapter 46. John Wick Combat Template. It's here. It's finally here. Li Ming suppressed his excitement and forced himself to calm down as he ran full tilt. He was training his endurance. According to John, making the right tactical choices in a fight is crucial, but various physical limits have to be kept up as well. So John set 3 main training priorities: physical conditioning, reaction speed, and marksmanship. Physical conditioning extends Li Ming's fight time. Just as with John, being shot or falling from a height shouldn't immediately stop you. Reaction speed lets you respond faster. In combat, firing a shot 1 step ahead of your opponent is often more decisive than any amount of fancy technique. And marksmanship was obvious. What kind of assassin doesn't have good aim? John also taught Li Ming a lot of firearms theory, so in 1 week, Li Ming's shooting rose to level 4, firearms mastery to level 5, and even his fighting, which he'd barely trained before, jumped to level 6. The benefit of a good teacher was obvious. Alfred was furious. After training, Li Ming checked his skill list. John Wick Combat Template Lord 3 allows the user to fight in John Wick's manner. Template level can be increased by learning additional combat skills. After a little study, Li Ming understood the skill. The combat template was basically a chassis, like a gun, and his individual skills were the attachments and ammunition. The more and better the attachments, the higher the weapon's level, and the stronger the rounds it fires. They complemented one another. Even though the template was only level 3, Li Ming had already changed drastically. He went back to spar with John, and this time actually lasted over a minute, and John wasn't holding back. John is proficient in almost every fighting and killing method. Lasting that long was a real feat. Many elite assassins couldn't hang on for more than a minute against him. "Li, your progress is astonishing. It's like fighting myself," John said. John had been surprised many times since he'd started training Li Ming, but this genuinely impressed him. Making the best choices in combat is something everyone admires, but very few can really do it. John had only taught by example for a few days, and Li Ming had already grasped the essence, something many assassins never comprehend in a lifetime. "If your technique weren't still lacking, I think it would take serious effort to beat you," John added sincerely. "It's all because you, Jonathan, are such a great teacher," Li Ming said with a grin, not forgetting to flatter him. John Wick Combat Template of Point 3 didn't mean Li Ming had 30% of John's power. It indicated his degree of mastery of that combat style. Li Ming estimated that John's current level was around 11.8. After all, he'd been away from the assassin world for years, and his edge had dulled. Even so, Li Ming thought the present-day John could still wreak havoc across the underworld. He could only imagine how deadly John had been at his peak. Under John's precise scientific training, the temporary attributes grafted onto Li Ming's body had stabilized, and completing the initial task had granted him 3 free attribute points. He aimed for balance. Mental stats weren't very useful right now, so he added 2 points to strength and 1 to constitution, bringing strength, constitution, and agility into alignment. His status panel now read: Name Li Ming, Strength 17, Constitution 17, Agility 17, Spirit 12, Skills, Fighting level 6, Shooting level 4, Firearms Mastery level 5, John Wick Combat Template level 3 items, Gotham Scepter points 21,000. If he fought John again, maybe he could last 3 minutes now, Li Ming thought. Still, his shooting needed work. He judged his effectiveness strongest inside 10 meters. At 20 meters, he'd have to aim and would be at a disadvantage. Beyond 20 meters, his combat power fell off sharply. It wasn't that he couldn't hit targets past 30 meters, but he couldn't do it quickly and reliably under pressure. He definitely needed dedicated marksmanship practice. Satisfied with his gains, Li Ming moved on to task selection. He pulled up the assassin bounty board on his phone. Anyone could accept those open bounties. You could even find bounties on some people if you looked closely. In this world, everyone was prey. CEO of a listed company, $3,000. Too little. Insurance salesman, $5,000. Too little. President of a bank, $200,000. Li Ming's eyes lit up, but after opening the full briefing, he closed it. Federal Reserve? Nope. After a while, he found a more suitable target. Gang leader, $20,000. Gang leader hits were usually ignored unless the payout was huge. Leaders rarely moved alone, and the bounty only named the leader. In reality, you had to deal with many subordinates and a high chance of retaliation. That's why gang bounties either paid very well or were taken by some rookie who didn't know any better, like Li Ming's original body. But Li Ming had the Gotham scepter, and encirclement was the thing he feared least. If anything, he hoped people would surround him. That flawless infiltration assassination he'd pulled off when he first arrived still bolstered his reputation. His prestige had climbed to 516 points. His fans at the assassin stronghold were doing a good job of hyping him up. Having tasted success once, he was ready to do it again. After all, one good show wasn't enough. Pedo? John muttered as Li Ming told him the name. All right, small gang, no big backing. John approved of Li Ming's choice as practice. Despite his long retirement, John's knowledge of the underworld far exceeded Li Ming's. Li Ming drove out immediately, still in the car he'd taken from the last gang. Maybe he'd snag a nicer one this time. After a careful recon, Li Ming assessed the stronghold, a detached two-story villa, 4 guards patrolling and posted around the garden, 4 lookouts on the roof, and roughly 10 more inside the house. Their armory was respectable, rifles and shotguns on hand. But Li Ming kept John's lesson in mind. If you shoot before the other person does, no weapon they have can threaten you. Thanks to Dunru Chingkong for the monthly pass. The next chapter will be a bloodbath. The plot is about to speed up. Please keep reading. Chapter 47. Cutting through like chopping vegetables. Li Ming slipped into the garden from a blind spot he had observed earlier. He had memorized the patrol pattern and waited a few seconds at the corner of the wall. Sure enough, a guard with a shotgun walked past. With one hand, Li Ming clamped the guard's mouth, and with the other, he plunged a dagger into the man's throat. The guard died instantly, without making a sound. Li Ming lowered the body gently, grabbed the walkie-talkie from the guard's belt, and moved along the wall to the next position. The second guard was stronger. Li Ming couldn't cover his mouth as easily, but that didn't matter. He stabbed the guard in the lower abdomen to bend him over in pain, then slit his throat. Another man was gone. 2 guards disappeared without a sound. Up on the roof, a sentry frowned and picked up his radio. "Cheese, Tucker. Where did you go?" "Cough, smoking," came the reply. The sentry watched as a tattooed hand appeared from a blind spot holding a cigarette. The hand twitched, then disappeared. "2 lazy bums," the sentry muttered, and the others, hearing the exchange, relaxed. Li Ming let go of the body and continued his work. The other 2 guards outside the villa were farther away, but Li Ming moved with practiced efficiency and removed them as well. Only when a sentry finally saw a body lying in the garden did alarm bells start to ring. He sounded the alert and called his 3 companions to come secure the area. Inside the villa, the gang members stirred, each taking up positions at the entrances as if preparing for a serious assault. Then something rolled across the floor and the silence broke. A grenade. It landed among them and exploded. Chaos erupted. Using the explosion as cover, Li Ming flipped through a window into the villa's living room and opened fire. 5 rapid shots incapacitated the gang members exposed in his line of sight. As the others took cover and returned fire, he finished off 3 more on the floor and changed position, using tables, chairs, and sofas for cover. He shot 2 more with 2 quick rounds and drew a hail of gunfire. He rolled under a table, spotted someone not far away, and shot that person in the calf. The man screamed, fell, and exposed himself. Li Ming didn't hesitate. 2 shots to the body and 1 to the head ended him. In less than a minute, 4 members in the villa lay dead, and 3 more were writhing on the ground, shot and screaming, none of them having caught a glimpse of their attacker. "Pato, it's an elite assassin. Move in together. We have to take him down," one of the gang leaders barked. Pato, Li Ming's target and the gang boss, had already found a hiding place when the rooftop sentry raised the alarm. That was why Li Ming couldn't find him during the initial surprise. Li Ming quickly counted heads. The 4 rooftop sentries had come down, leaving 7 people in the house, including Pato. At Pato's order, 5 subordinates rushed toward the place Li Ming had been firing from. Pato took another man and turned to run. A shot hit Pato in the thigh, and he collapsed on the lawn. He tried to get up and realized Li Ming had already moved outside and was aiming at them. Two more shots felled the subordinate beside Pato. The distance was no more than 20 meters, and Li Ming's marksmanship was precise. Li Ming had expected Pato to flee. He had already flipped out of the window and ambushed him. The five inside the house fled into the yard like headless flies. Li Ming held a magazine in one hand and fired with the other. After 2 shots, he ejected the magazine, reloaded quickly, and headshot a thug who peered out. He was using John's favorite handgun, a Terran Tactical customized Glock 34, the Tactical Master, with a 17-round magazine. John had taught him this combat style so often that keeping track of his remaining rounds was instinctive. John had always emphasized shooting first, reducing the enemy's firing cadence to keep oneself safe. Li Ming used that lesson now. Only 4 gang members remained active in the field, each hiding in blind spots and unwilling to move. They had never seen an assassin like this. Out of 16 men, only 4 now posed any resistance. A grenade rolled in again, and the 4 scattered. Li Ming seized the chance and killed 2 of them instantly. Another turned and ran, but Li Ming shot him down. The last man snapped. He couldn't find Li Ming's exact location, leaned against a window, and began spraying wildly with his rifle. Behind him, Li Ming had slipped into the room through the blind spot and with a single shot ended his madness. Li Ming didn't relax. He moved through the room and finished off the wounded. Then he walked over to Pato. The boss, shot in the leg, couldn't stand and tried to crawl away. Even Pato hadn't expected his men to fall so quickly. Neither, honestly, had Li Ming. With John's combat template, it had felt like opening meridians. Killing had become as easy as eating. Of course, his opponents were only gang thugs. "Do you want to live?" Li Ming asked, looking down at him. "Yes," Pato nodded desperately. Li Ming smiled like a devil tempting a soul. "Call your men and tell them to come back right now. If they come quickly, I won't kill you." Pato stared up at him in disbelief. Li Ming said nothing further. He hauled Pato into the center of the room and ordered, "Call them." Pato fumbled for his phone. "The boss is under attack. Hurry back and save me." He blurted into the line before slamming the phone shut and looking up, pleading, "Sir, is that enough?" "Excellent," Li Ming said, nodding once, then added, remembering something. "One more thing. Where are your car keys?" Chapter 48. Winston Sheriff Locke. The death toll's been confirmed. It's about 34. About? Locke, who was in charge of the scene, blinked. "How many bodies are there? Can't you just count them?" The young officer's face went pale as he forced the words out. "We counted 35 bodies, but only 34 heads." Locke stiffened at the image, then shook his head to clear it. "Just put 34, he ordered. The officer complied, but kept muttering, shaken. They all killed each other. It was hell on earth. Who could do this? "Are you new?" Locke asked. Yes, sir. I was transferred from town the day before yesterday." The officer nodded repeatedly. "No wonder." Locke fished his phone out and checked the assassin form. His suspicion was confirmed, and a small, dangerous pride crept into his expression. This method of killing, only one person could have done it. Who? The wizard. The young officer didn't understand, so Locke explained, "A week ago, the Scorpion gang 10 kilometers out had the same thing. I handled that scene too. This is the same signature." "This is worse," the officer said, shuddering. "And all of it was the doing of an assassin known as the Wizard," Locke said, with a hint of admiration. "Truly, a masterpiece." He didn't mention that he'd been the one to coin the name. The legend growing around the Wizard made him feel oddly proud. "Sheriff?" The young man's voice pulled Locke back. "What do we do now?" Locke waved toward the ruined courtyard. "The usual. Clean up. We can't control hired assassins. Strip the place, hose it down, and file the report." Reputation 15. Li Ming drove his new car down the highway with the system's chime nagging in his ear. "Turn off notifications," he said. Silence. He checked his total reputation. Good. The increase felt satisfying. Pato was dead, but Li Ming had kept his promise. He hadn't personally killed him. Under the effect of Wrath of Gotham, Pato had thrown himself at death. A subordinate's bite finished him off. It wasn't his concern anymore. What irked him about the main quests were the vague success criteria that forced him to grind without direction. Was the system doing that on purpose? Ming suspected it might be. Still, regardless of how the criteria were written, he intended to aim for S-rank completions. The Gotham Scepter rewards for S-ranks were rumored to be powerful. If he could consistently earn special rewards, his growth would skyrocket. A message popped up. Mission complete. Bounty received and a gold coin. Ming turned toward the assassin hideout. He didn't care much for cash, but a gold coin was a different matter. The same man in charge met him there and handed the coin over with a slight bow. "Mr. Wizard, please accept this." Ming took it and nodded. "A $20,000 bounty doesn't usually come with a gold coin." The man smiled nervously. "Mr. Wizard's work is exceptional. An exception was made, like last time." Ming could tell the man had pulled some strings. Fair enough. The first massacre could have been luck or long planning, but to repeat it in short order proved the wizard's skill. "Also," the man added, "the manager of the New York Continental Hotel wants to meet you." "Winston? Yes, do you know him?" "I've heard of him." A hard, wise face flashed in Ming's mind. Winston was an important figure in this world, an influential man with connections to John Wick. "He said if you have time, you can come to the Continental anytime," the man continued. "I suggest you go. It will help raise your membership level." The Continental ran a membership system. Higher levels unlocked better benefits. The bulletproof vest Ming wanted required a certain rank to be eligible, and decisions about membership rested with the Continental's manager. Ming wouldn't refuse. He asked for directions and went straight to the hotel. The New York Continental looked like a giant iron from the street, but inside it was a world of its own. Located in the heart of the city, it projected quiet power. After walking a long, narrow corridor, Ming arrived at the front desk. The receptionist was a gentlemanly black man, Charon. Don't let the desk job fool anyone. Anyone who knew the Continental also knew Charon could be lethal. Without the Gotham Scepter, Ming didn't feel confident he could beat him in a straight fight. "Sir, how may I help you?" Charon asked in his calm, measured tone. "I'm here to see the manager. He invited me." Ming said. "May I have your name?" Ming. "So you are Mr. Wizard." Charon's face registered the name immediately. Backed by the Continental, his information network was thorough. "The manager has been expecting you. First time at the New York Continental?" "Yes. Please follow me." Charon called a waiter and led Ming onward, taking them through a shortcut that passed the kitchen. They emerged into the hotel's inner world, the assassin's private bar. It looked like a regular bar, except entry required a gold coin, and even a single drink would cost another. Knowing how those gold coins were sourced, it was chilling. They drank in a currency bought with blood. A waiter guided Ming to Winston. The manager was a broad-faced older man with small, shrewd eyes that conveyed both warmth and calculation. "Mr. Wizard, a pleasure." Winston stood and extended his hand. "I'm Winston, the manager." Ming, call me Lee." Ming smiled. "I've heard John mention you." Winston's expression tightened at the name. John Wick. It was an old, familiar name. "John Wick," he said, half to himself. He'd known John a long time. "You live with him?" "Yes, John is my mentor now." Ming's tone was casual. Winston's smile broadened. "You're John's disciple. Welcome. It's good to meet you." Chapter 49. Breaking the Calm. "What would you like to drink?" "It's on me," Winston asked. "Bourbon." Winston's smile widened. Of course, truly Jonathan's disciple. Bourbon was John Wick's favorite, and Ming had said it deliberately to make a connection. He'd learned how to use small details to build trust. Winston couldn't verify it with John, and even if he asked, Ming hadn't lied. John was indeed his teacher, at least for the last half-month. The idea of him being a disciple was mostly Winston's imagination, but it made the conversation smoother. "I started paying attention to you a week ago when you completed your first bounty," Winston said, raising his glass to clink with Ming's. "I was wondering when you'd pull another surprise. I didn't expect it so soon." "Astonishing." "Thanks." Ming sipped the bourbon. It was decent, with a faint sweetness. "What I'm really curious about is how you made them turn on each other," Winston asked, the question everyone wanted answered. Ming answered simply, "Magic." "Magic?" Winston repeated, then smiled. "Very fitting. A wizard should use magic." Winston didn't press further. Whatever Li Ming's secret was, it was understandable he wouldn't explain it. Only Li Ming knew it was the truth. "How's Jonathan doing these days?" Li Ming asked. "Not well," Winston admitted. He was pretty dejected after Helen passed. "Does he want to come back?" If John returned to the assassin world, the balance of power would shift. "Not yet," Winston said. "He paid too high a price when he retired." Conversation turned easily to John, and by the end, Winston had thought things through. "Lee, I'd like to invite you to become a junior member of the Continental," he said. "Given you've only completed 2 bounties, this is already an exceptional promotion." "I'd be honored," Li Ming replied without hesitation. That was, after all, why he'd come. He'd expected tests and interviews, not an immediate promotion. Winston explained, "To become a senior member, the High Table requires completion of a designated bounty. If you want to pursue that, come to me when you're ready. But ask Jonathan before you decide." "Okay," Li Ming said. He nodded to the detail Winston omitted. By accepting the junior membership, he would fall under the New York Continental's jurisdiction. With his supposed connection to John, that was implicit and left unsaid. As Li Ming stood to leave, Winston handed him a small box, a welcome gift. Inside were 5 gold coins. "Thank you," Li Ming said, shaking the box and already plotting how to use the favor. Then Charon appeared by the door with another package. "From the manager," Charon said, holding out a box. Li Ming opened it. "High-end dog food. Please give my regards to Mr. Wick," Charon added, a touch friendlier than before. "No problem," Li Ming said. He collected his gifts and left, pleased that he'd managed to deceive 2 people in one evening. By the time Li Ming got back to John's house, John was at the kitchen table eating with a frown. Helen had been the cook. John could manage a meal, but his efforts left much to be desired. Fortunately, Li Ming had grabbed a boxed pizza on the way back and set it on the table. "What is this?" John asked, eyeing the box. "Winston sent dog food for Daisy," Li Ming said, casually describing how Winston had assumed he was John's disciple and sent something along as a courtesy. John's interest was less in the disciple claim than in Winston and the Continental, so Li Ming answered those questions too. Seeing John didn't correct him, Li Ming counted his disciple status as affirmed, something he could leverage later. After dinner, Li Ming sat on the living room floor with Daisy. The beagle was clingy and content, rolling over to expose her belly for pats. Then the doorbell rang. John and Li Ming exchanged looks. John's social circle was tiny. The only visitors he got were from the old world. Li Ming's instincts told him who it was before John opened the door. Santino D'Antonio had a claim on John, a blood oath, and he wouldn't come without a purpose. Li Ming scooped Daisy up and slipped out the side door, deciding to avoid whatever trouble was coming. John opened the door to the man he most dreaded. "Hello, John," Santino said, impeccably dressed in a suit and overcoat, his arrogance barely concealed. "Santino," John said. "May I come in?" Santino asked. John stepped aside and watched as 4 or 5 cars filled the street outside, each with men posted behind them. Santino had brought back up. Once inside, John realized Li Ming and Daisy were gone. A small relief eased across him. The situation would be cleaner without an innocent caught in it. "Listen, John, I didn't want to do this," Santino said after they sat, "but no one can retire without consequences." "I'm retired," John said quietly. Santino took a leather envelope from his pocket and pushed it across the table. He opened it. A small parchment lay inside, imprinted with a bloody fingerprint. "Don't forget that night," Santino said. "If it weren't for me helping you with an impossible task, you wouldn't be here. This is your blood. You swore with your soul." John stared at the blood oath, the memory of that other life closing in around him. He said nothing, only the word retired hanging between them like a fragile defense. Chapter 50. Li Ming is a good friend. "I'm not the man I used to be. Sorry. No." John shook his head and stood up. He closed the distance between them without any ceremony and walked away, refusing to continue the conversation. Unlike in the original story, where he'd already been dragged into another round of violence, this John was still raw from his wife's death. He couldn't summon the ruthless certainty that once defined him. Santino's expression hardened. He left in a huff, but as he reached John's car, he spoke again, oddly admiring. "Your house is beautiful, John." John frowned. closed the door, and didn't notice that those were the last words he'd ever hear before the house was attacked. Santino hadn't left. He returned to his car and lugged out a grenade launcher. Methodically, he fed shells in, aimed at the house, and opened fire. Boom, boom, boom. Santino avoided the living room where John stood, deliberately striking the house's sides. Each explosion rolled through the rooms like a mutiny, and a final shockwave threw John from the doorway out into the garden. For a long moment, he lay there stunned, watching the place that held so many memories of Helen reduced to smoke and flame. He tried to rise because Daisy and Li Ming might still be inside, but his knees wouldn't cooperate. From a short distance away, Li Ming held Daisy in his arms and watched with a resigned shake of the head. Compared to John, the man and his little beagle were unmarked, clean, composed. Li Ming speculated about Santino's thinking. If Santino blew John to pieces, that would show John was weak and unworthy, something a boss with a fragile ego couldn't tolerate. But the real responsibility, Li Ming suspected, lay with John himself. John had given Santino a blood oath. Under the rules of their world, Santino had first been obliged to help John. Now John refused to reciprocate. From Santino's point of view, it was a betrayal. Watching the house burn, Li Ming's mind wandered through the tangled past. Hugo clearing the local gangs for John's retirement, Yusef's uprising, the chain of debts and blood oath that dragged John back into the abyss. It wasn't the high table alone that hunted John. He had helped make his own monster. Li Ming kept those thoughts to himself, though. They were not the consolation John needed now. When Santino finally left for good, John found the strength to stand. True to a protagonist's constitution, he was bruised but alive. Li Ming deposited Daisy on the grass and hurried over, searching John for injuries. "Are you hurt? Are you okay?" he asked. John looked at him, grateful for the concern. "Nothing serious." It was Santino D'Antonio. John stared at the flames and remembered the framed photo of Helen inside. He pressed his jaw shut and swallowed a rising hate. "He had a marker from me. I refused him." "Because you refused, he burned your house down." Li Ming's tone went sharp, indignant on John's behalf. "That's too much. At least you're both safe." John nodded toward Li Ming and Daisy. Seeing them unhurt eased something in him. Li Ming gave a helpless, almost irreverent sigh and added, "It's a shame about the expensive dog food Winston sent you, though." John looked down at the little beagle chewing at his pant leg. A fierce gratitude for Li Ming filled him. If Li Ming hadn't taken Daisy out, the dog that had been his last connection to Helen might have been lost. It was the second time Li Ming had saved Daisy. "And the house," Li Ming continued lightly, but John's eyes narrowed. He remembered the photographs, the home they'd shared. Everything inside was likely gone. Even after the fire department put out the blaze, the heat in John's chest did not cool. John began. "Yeah? I'll leave Daisy with you for now." "Where are you going?" Li Ming asked immediately. Worry and pride mingled in his voice. "To settle this," John said flat. "I'll come with you." Li Ming shot up, eager and earnest. He wasn't going to miss a chance to help and to be near his idol. "You don't have to put me in danger," John said. "This is my business." "Jonathan," Li Ming said, using the more formal name with a boyish seriousness, "people only ever see your power. I know you care about more than that. When your idol is in trouble, how could a fan just stand by?" He sounded sincere, more than any of John's acquaintances. John had almost no friends who would risk anything for him. That made Li Ming's offer precious. "Okay," John conceded at last, "but be careful." "Where to?" Li Ming asked again. "The Continental," John replied. "Good. We can even take Daisy there," Li Ming said, crouching to stroke the dog, who wagged her tail with innocent bliss. "There was a problem," John added, anger creeping back into his voice. "My car's totaled." John's beloved Ford Mustang had been in the garage. Under a grenade launcher, it would be more than salvageable damage. Li Ming suddenly reached into his pocket and tossed something to John. John caught it on instinct. He recognized the weight, the jagged metal edge. Car keys. "I took your car out for a spin earlier," Li Ming said, casual as ever. "No need to thank me." John stared at the keys. Li Ming had saved the Mustang. The loss of the house and the burned photographs were already enough. There was no need for John to lose his last practical piece of himself. Li Ming's small, unexpected kindness cut through the fog around John's heart like a handkerchief through smoke. He pocketed the keys and set his jaw. "Let's go then," John said. Li Ming picked Daisy up and fell into step beside him. The two men, one hollowed by grief, the other brimming with awkward loyalty, walked toward the Continental, ready to face whatever Santino D'Antonio had set in motion. Chapter 51. Target: the Pope. "You refused his blood oath. You should be grateful he only burned your house." How could you even think of swearing a blood oath to someone like Santino D'Antonio? In the Continental Hotel's garden, even Winston, the picture of composure, couldn't keep his voice level. Santino was the kind of scoundrel everyone feared, powerful, well-connected, and utterly unscrupulous. To be bound to him by a blood oath was unthinkable. "I had no choice. It was the only way out at the time," John said. "You call that escaping?" Winston glanced at John's disheveled appearance and found the explanation thin. He changed the subject. "What did he ask you to do?" "I didn't ask," John said flatly. "I refused." Winston raised two fingers and sighed. "There are two rules you never break, Jonathan. No killing in the Continental, and every blood oath must be fulfilled. My punishment is only excommunication from the Continental. Break the High Table's traditions, and the consequences are far worse." "Do I have no choice?" John asked. He didn't want to work for Santino, but Winston shook his head. "If you refuse a blood oath, you will die. If you kill the oath giver, you will die. If you run, you will die." "You already agreed to him when he forced the oath," Winston said, disappointed. He drew a breath. "Go and fulfill his request, and you'll be free. In time, you can get revenge or burn his house down if you must," Winston added. John answered quickly, resignation in his voice. "Yes, by the rules." Winston felt a weight lift. He knew John well enough to know what he was capable of. He took a sip of coffee to steady himself. "Without rules, we're no different from animals." He nodded to Li Ming. "Lie." "Winston." Li Ming returned the greeting. Seeing the two together, Winston's mood shifted to a wary urgency. "Li, you're not going with John, are you?" "Of course I am," Li Ming said with a small smile. Winston's breath hitched. An internationally feared night demon paired with a rising wizard, this combination was dangerous. He turned to John. "Try to keep the commotion to a minimum. A turf war is one thing, but large-scale incidents in public places will attract too much attention." "What kind of incidents?" John asked, puzzled. Winston looked surprised that John didn't know. "Lee has a nickname, the Wizard. He finished a bounty yesterday, didn't he?" John nodded. "I taught him a few things, and he went to practice last night." Winston's expression softened and then went distant as he pictured the aftermath of Lie's bounties: corpses, dismemberment, severed limbs. He murmured, "The student surpasses the master." John still didn't fully grasp Winston's meaning when the three left the Continental. Li Ming shrugged off the remark. The stronger his teammate, the more secure John felt. "Where are we going?" Lee asked. "The art gallery," John replied, then added, "Lee, you wait outside." "All right." Santino didn't know Li Ming existed. It was better to keep him in the shadows. John went in alone. Bodyguards checked him thoroughly for weapons before ushering him toward Santino. The boss sat on a sofa with his back to the door, staring at a massive oil painting. "This was my father's collection," Santino said, not yet getting to the point. "A canvas, a little oil, yet I come here to see him." John ignored the sentiment and sat down. "I didn't want to come find you either, John," Santino went on. "But you owe me. I know what you're thinking, counting guards, looking for ways to kill me. With that woman's pencil, that man's cane, that person's glasses." "With my own hands," John said coolly. Santino only smiled. "But you know you can't kill me, right?" "What do you want?" John asked, his voice cold. Santino's smile vanished. "I want you to kill my sister." John blinked. He had expected difficult targets, but not this. "Why?" "The high table has 12 seats. When my father died, he passed the seat to her," Santino said quietly, bitterness twisting his words. "I keep wondering what I could have done if it had been mine." "You want me to kill Gianna D'Antonio, your sister?" John confirmed. "I can't do it," Santino said, pretending to be torn. "She's my blood. I love her." John found the whole thing absurd. "I can't. She will be crowned in Rome," Santino interrupted. "I need you to infiltrate through the catacombs and make it look like an accident." John opened his mouth, but Santino cut him off. Help me accomplish this, and you will have fulfilled your blood oath." John fell silent. He stood, turned, and left the gallery. Santino watched him go and without expression said, "Still the same, never wasting words." He knew the silence meant agreement. Outside, after they were clear of surveillance, Li Ming met John. "Jonathan, what's the target?" John let out a heavy sigh. "The Pope of Rome." Li Ming stared. "What?" John explained Santino's plan. Gianna D'Antonio would be crowned in Rome, and Santino wanted her dead. Li Ming listened without flinching. "Rome is too dangerous. You shouldn't go," John urged. "It's precisely because it's dangerous that I must," Li Ming said matter-of-factly. "Someone has to cover your retreat." John didn't try to dissuade him again. In the darkness of his situation, Li Ming felt like a small, bright certainty. Li Ming's mind flicked to his own ledger. How many prestige points would killing the Pope be worth? The question passed quickly. The decision had already been made. Chapter 52, Black Technology, Bulletproof Suit. John first went to a small bank where he kept caches of supplies. As a world-class assassin, he had stashes all over the globe and was a very wealthy man. In that one tiny bank, he kept over 100 gold coins. Compared with John, the 5 gold coins Li Ming had carried were negligible. But Li Ming had an advantage in the mission world. He never stayed short of cash for long. He had 5 coins earlier. After John handed him a handful, he now had 55. "Tell me anytime you need them," John said as he pushed the gold across. "Okay." Li Ming pocketed the coins. Then John surprised him. "I'm sorry." Li Ming blinked. "For what?" "I promised to teach you for half a month. I've only taught you a week, and now I've dragged you into something dangerous." John sounded sincere. Li Ming had forgotten the promise, but John hadn't. He smiled wryly. "It's fine," he said. "Jonathan, if you feel bad, teach me everything you know, or have someone else finish it, whatever works." "No problem," John nodded. They didn't waste time and took a flight to Rome. Not long after they landed, John noticed they were being watched. "Someone is tailing us," he warned. "Continental Hotel?" Li Ming asked. "Yes." Li Ming split off to look like an ordinary passenger, walking in a different direction from John. In Rome, he had no reputation. Perhaps some people had heard the name Wizard, but his face was unfamiliar. The watchers paid no attention to him. To throw the tail off, Li Ming wandered the city for half a day before heading to the address John had given him, the Continental Hotel. Compared to the Flatiron in New York, Rome's Continental looked like a castle, grand and steeped in culture. "Welcome to the Continental Hotel. How may I assist you?" the front desk clerk asked in Italian. Li Ming, who seemed to have an instinctive fluency in mission world languages, answered in perfect Italian. "I need a room," he said, dropping a gold coin on the counter. "And your name, please?" "Li Ming." The clerk checked the register, then handed him a room key. "Welcome, Mr. Wizard." So the alias had already made the archives. Li Ming smiled inwardly, a little amused at his own notoriety. He took a standard suite and immediately called John. Time was tight. They had 3 things to prepare for: maps, armor, and weapons, and each item pointed to a different location in Rome. They used the Continental's hidden passages. Outside the hotel's staff, they had little to fear. Julius, the hotel's manager, was John's friend and would not betray them. Even if Julius suspected John's target, he would not reveal it. John led Li Ming to a small private library. The librarian greeted John with a respectful nod. "Mr. Wick." He paused when he saw Li Ming standing beside him, uncertain whether to say more. "He's with me," John said. The librarian studied Li Ming. He knew John to be a solitary man and was surprised to see him with a companion. He opened a secret door behind a bookshelf and ushered them inside, where a prepared map lay waiting. It was obvious Santino had long intended his sister's elimination. The librarian compared the original layout of the D'Antonio estate with the current plans and traced several routes through the catacombs for infiltration. John memorized the routes. Li Ming focused on the peripheral roads. His role was to rendezvous with John after the assassination, not to go deep into the estate. According to the plan, Jonna would accept her fate the moment she saw John. There was nothing Li Ming could do by going inside. The idea was that later, when Li Ming caused a scene, everyone would conclude that 2 people had taken part in killing the Pope, and Santino's reputation would remain intact. As they left, John warned the librarian, "Don't tell anyone I brought someone with me." The librarian nodded briskly. He supplied information, but he wasn't on Santino's payroll and had no interest in getting entangled in trouble. Next, John took Li Ming to a tailor's workshop. After slipping 2 gold coins to a woman at a sewing table, they were led into a private fitting room. Mr. Wick, welcome to Rome, a handsome, bald man in charge greeted them. Li Ming compared him briefly to a similar figure back in Gotham, Victor, and decided Angelo was at least as handsome. Angelo, this is Lai. John hesitated, then added, Wizard. Angelo's face lit up. He crossed the room and shook Li Ming's hand. So you are Mr. Wizard. A pleasure. Li Ming felt embarrassed. I didn't expect anyone in Rome to know me. Your reputation here is not small, Angelo said enthusiastically. Your methods, astonishing. Art. Li Ming realized Angelo's praise was genuine enough, and John's curiosity about Li Ming's exploits grew. But they had work to do. Both men needed custom suits. Angelo set about taking measurements without wasting words. Formal or social? He asked. Social, John said. Daytime or evening? Both. John replied with the casual air of a man who could afford anything. Li Ming chose a younger, more modern cut. Then came the reason Li Ming had been most eager to be here, the bulletproof material. Angelo, ignoring the shop's usual restrictions because John was present, produced the most advanced fabric they offered. This is the latest, he said. It achieves 0 bullet penetration. A female tailor picked up a pistol and fired several rounds at a mannequin wearing the vest. The outer layer of the suit showed a hole. Beyond that, the mannequin was unmarked. The material, a sort of black technology weave unique to John Wick's world, stopped pistol bullets and even rounds from assault rifles. The only limitation was piercing attacks. As clothing, it couldn't be made invulnerable. However, Angelo raised an eyebrow, it might still hurt a lot. John and Li Ming exchanged looks. Protection and pain weren't the same thing, and in their line of work, sometimes one mattered as much as the other. They continued the fittings, readying themselves for the dangerous days ahead. Chapter 53, Demolition Wizard. After choosing the bulletproof suits, Angelo told them he'd have them delivered to the Continental once they were ready. John then offered to take Li Ming to pick out weapons, but Li Ming had other ideas. Jonathan, do you have any heavy-duty firepower? Li Ming asked. Heavy-duty? John considered. We have the most advanced shotguns. Li Ming frowned. Not enough? Anything bigger? He spread his hands to indicate something massive. John's face tightened. You want to use explosives in Rome? Rocket launchers, grenade launchers, landmines, any of those would do. Li Ming counted off possibilities on his fingers. I don't intend to hurt innocents, but it's better to be over-prepared. John warned him seriously. Bombs will cause collateral damage. Killing people besides the target, especially civilians, will get you pursued by the authorities. Even though the High Table dominated their world, the official authorities still had some jurisdiction. Large-scale weapons in a city were strictly forbidden. Assassins here prided themselves on precision. Unless a target could be isolated, explosives were rarely used. Is that why they call you a wizard? Li Ming scoffed. Someone who plays with explosives is a demolition genius, not a wizard. I won't hurt innocents. Still, over-prepared is good. John hesitated. Killing the Pope would not end their problems. It would begin a cascade of consequences. Military-grade weapons are regulated, he said. The High Table doesn't allow private sales. Li Ming's disappointment was visible. Then John's tone changed. But I might know someone, he said. Evening fell quickly. The D'Antonio estate was enormous, less an estate than a fortress. As the Camorra stronghold and one of the High Table's 12 seats, it sat atop layers of ancient Roman ruins. Beneath the mansion ran tombs and passageways. Standing there made Li Ming feel like he'd wandered into Assassin's Creed 2. He imagined himself a spirit of Ezio and Altair, sworn to execute a flawless infiltration. At a junction in the tombs, Li Ming planted another claymore. Blocking pursuers in a corridor without collapsing it called for something lethal but controlled. He'd calculated the arc so there would be a safe lane left for John to get through later. John, you memorized the route? Don't take any wrong turns. John had memorized it. He eyed the buried mines more than once. These are brutal, Lai. They won't complain, Li Ming said matter-of-factly. John understood the other unspoken concern. Using such weapons would paint a target on Li Ming's back. Li Ming had been in this world long enough to know how assassins operated. They valued a code. Even if someone thought Li Ming didn't play by the rules, true assassins preferred honor. They often chose close combat and rarely fired on a foe at range. As long as the pursuers kept to convention, no one could take them both down with the defenses Li Ming had prepared. "I'm going. Be careful." They were fully armed by then. Bulletproof suits, pistols, rifles, shotguns, extra magazines, strategically stashed along the passages. They both knew that killing the Pope was only half the mission. The real challenge would be the escape. Beyond the Pope's guards, Santino's people might move to silence them. John had a premonition Santino would act. Li Ming suspected ambushes were already being set. Outside, the coronation was in full swing. The Pope was the centerpiece of a massive spectacle. Singers on stage, the audience cheering, power players mingling. The Pope's office in this world was less religious authority than a political crown. Guided by a detailed map, John blended into the inner circle and slipped into the dressing area when Gianna excused herself to retouch her makeup. All of her bodyguards remained outside, including Cassian, her most trusted assassin guard. The dressing room was lavish, with a large bathtub in the center. Gianna had just stepped to the mirror and bent to check her lipstick when she looked up and noticed John standing there. "John?" Her voice froze. She knew he wasn't there to congratulate her. John advanced with a pistol in hand. "I still consider you a friend," he said. Gianna's face hardened. "Not long ago you were my friend," she answered, not shouting. She knew John could kill her instantly. Her defiance was for appearances and for the past they'd shared. "Why are you here, John?" "Why now?" "For a blood oath," John replied. "Whose?" Gianna asked, though she already had her suspicions. "Your brother's." She showed no surprise. Calmly, she began removing her jewelry and said, "Was this a blood debt you owed when you left the organization?" John nodded and stepped closer, cutting off any chance of escape. "What was the name of the woman who ended my life?" she asked, steady. "Helen," John answered. When she realized the reason, Gianna turned to face him fully and spoke her last words with composure. "Do you know what happens after I die? Santino will take your seat on the high table. He'll move into New York, and you'll be the one to hand it over." John listened without flinching. How the political game would shift after her death didn't change what he meant to do. He had one goal: keep himself, Li Ming, his dog, and his car alive. He fired 2 words in finality: justice for Helen, and the deed was done. John left the dressing room the same way he came in, precise, unhurried, and already moving toward the next danger. Chapter 54, Unsporting Conduct. John watched in silence as Gianna gave no response. Her face lost color. She began to undress, stepped into the bath, and took the hairpin from her hair. The pin's tip was razor-sharp. She pressed it into her wrist and sliced deep. "Why?" John asked, bewildered. "I live by my own rules, and I'll die by my own rules," Gianna said, her voice carrying the haughty defiance of a pope. John said nothing. He sat on the edge of the tub and held her hand as her breathing grew shallow. Her head went limp, and she slumped forward into the water. Before he left, John fired a single, precise shot to the head, no chance left for revival. The job was done, but there was no satisfaction in it. He slipped out of the room and into the crowd, planning to melt away, when a familiar voice called his name. "John?" He turned. Cassian stood there, Gianna's chief bodyguard. Cassian's face went taut. "Are you working?" he blurted. "Yes," John replied. "You?" "I am too." Cassian's jaw tightened. Without further preamble, they drew pistols at the same time and fired. Both men fell, struck by the other's bullet, protected, however, by body armor, pain but no mortal wound. John was first back on his feet, already blending into the press of people. Cassian, steadied by his men, barked into his radio and gave chase, then sprinted for Gianna's room. They ran different routes through the estate, but both were racing. When Cassian reached the bath, it was already too late. The water had turned crimson. Meanwhile, John faced another problem. Guards and bodyguards converged on him from all sides. They moved to block and pursue, but John was always a step ahead, shooting first, striking hard. Strangest of all, the party around them continued as if nothing were happening. Guests danced and laughed, oblivious to the gunfire, as if they were background props in a game. That was one reason Li Ming had stayed out of the inner area. If he'd been there, he joked, He would have been landing headshots on everyone, targets uncertain, so he spared himself the trouble. John ran like a force of nature. In his wake, men collapsed. The catacombs swallowed the sounds of pursuit. He cut through a narrow tunnel, dispatching anyone who followed, then doubled back toward an exit. As he neared it, a short-haired woman in a sharp suit stepped forward. Ares, Santino's personal bodyguard, stern, efficient, and wearing Santino's same arrogant expression. "Clean up?" John asked. Ares nodded and made a hand signal that meant there was only one target left. "Just one," John said under his breath. Behind Ares, a dozen assassins emerged, guns up. John pulled his jacket around his head and retreated, Ares and his men pressing the chase. They weren't a threat to terrify him. This was about being funneled where someone else wanted him. But then, boom! Li Ming detonated the mine. The blast swept the confined catacombs like a blade. 700 steel balls sprayed the corridor, each one a deadly projectile. In that narrow space, the anti-personnel device was horrific. When dust and smoke cleared, the corridor was a tableau of carnage. What had been full-grown men lay maimed and silent. Li Ming and John paused, momentarily stunned by the scale of the destruction. One man, who'd stood nearly 6 feet tall, now lay reduced to about knee height. Then they moved quickly, finishing off the few survivors and running for the exit. There were more assassins blocking other passages. The plan had been to herd John toward them. No one had expected Li Ming's ambush to wipe out Ares' men entirely. If Ares could have accused someone of unsporting conduct, Li Ming would have been the obvious target. They burst back into daylight. "How many mines did you plant?" John asked. 3, Li Ming answered and pressed the button. 2 more explosions collapsed the catacomb entrance behind them. "This way," Li Ming said, shepherding John to the car they'd left idling. He started the engine and drove toward the Continental Hotel. A car suddenly veered out and smashed into their rear bumper. Li Ming wrestled the wheel, barely keeping control. "It's Cassian," John said. "He got here fast." Li Ming cursed under his breath. Cassian must have been lying in wait, familiar with the D'Antonio estate as he was. Shots rang out. Li Ming kept the car steady while John fired back, but Cassian was a seasoned assassin and evaded most of the return fire. Li Ming realized he'd been reckless. He should have let John drive. His own skills were competent, but not Cassian level. Cassian forced them to a stop not far from the Continental. The 3 men clambered out and traded gunfire. When a hand-to-hand brawl broke out, Cassian tackled John, and they crashed through a glass door into the hotel. Julius, the Continental's manager, appeared immediately. "Gentlemen," he said crisply, "I must remind you, no fighting in the Continental Hotel." John and Cassian froze. "No, sir," John said, straightening. Cassian stilled as well. "Very good," Julius continued. "I suggest you both move to the bar and cool down." They glanced at each other. "Gin?" John asked. "Bourbon," Cassian replied. They fell into step, shoulders almost brushing, and walked toward the bar as if nothing had happened. Li Ming watched them go and could only marvel at the strange camaraderie of the assassin world. Chapter 55, Reincarnators Arrive. I'm bound by a blood oath. The 3 men sat side by side at the bar. John took a sip of whiskey from the glass in the middle and began explaining to Cassian why he had killed Gianna. "Whose oath?" Cassian asked. "Her brother's." Cassian was silent for a moment. "I understand. You had no choice. He wanted her seat on the high table," John said. "Now he can have it," Cassian shrugged. He didn't care about the high table's internal squabbles. "So you're free?" John looked at him and replied, "Am I?" "No, not at all." Cassian shook his head and fixed John with a steady look. He didn't bother to soften it. "You killed someone I protected, someone close to me." "An eye for an eye, John." They raised their glasses at the same time and drank in perfect unison. "I'll make it quick," Cassian promised. "Thanks for the courtesy," John said. "I'll try to make it quick for you, too." Li Ming could tell they meant what they said. This wasn't idle small talk. Cassian stood and turned to Li Ming. "Wizard, right?" "Yes. Your driving was awful." Those few words darkened Li Ming's face. He couldn't deny it. "I'll try to make it quick for you," Cassian repeated. Li Ming made a difficult expression. "When I kill, it's usually either very painful or very fast. Not both." Cassian snorted. He took it for a tease and didn't answer. Assassins weren't exactly chatty. Only John knew Li Ming wasn't joking. Before leaving, Cassian placed a gold coin on the table. "Drinks are on me," he said to John. "Professional courtesy. 2 bourbons," John replied. "Very particular." Li Ming shrugged. After finishing their drinks, Li Ming and John headed back to their room. John's phone rang. "Hello, John." Santino. "If you're upset, I can understand," Santino said. "You might think I'm after you, but if I don't avenge my sister, what kind of man?" John cut the call off silently and hung up. "He wants to recruit you," Li Ming said. Since Santino couldn't eliminate John outright when they met, calling was a test. If John agreed to defect, Santino wouldn't issue a bounty. If he refused, the bounty would follow. John hadn't even answered. Santino's tone shifted. He dialed another number. "How can I?" was answered from a room full of clerks, the high table's account service. "I'd like to open a bounty." "Name? John Wick. Verification code 93505. Bounty status? Public. Bounty amount?" Santino thought, then said $7 million US. "Processing, please wait." The operator printed the order and uploaded it into the system. Moments later, Santino got confirmation. "Order confirmed." "Wait." Santino hesitated, then added, "Open another account." "Name? Li Ming. Bounty status? Public. Bounty amount? 400,000 US. Back at the Continental in Rome, the phones in the hallway were buzzing. Both men received messages. "Your bounty's out, John," Li Ming said with a smile. "Yours too," John replied, holding up his screen so Li Ming could see. They couldn't open their own bounty pages, but they could see each other's. Li Ming's screen read, "Open bounty order. Li Ming, $400,000. "Damn it," Li Ming cursed under his breath. "Why is my bounty only 400,000? "That's a lot," John said, trying to reassure him. Neither of them took the bounties too seriously. They expected Santino to act after their meeting. Li Ming had almost been looking forward to it. He opened his mission panel. Reputation. He closed it and opened it again. Since Santino had made the bounty public, Li Ming's reputation had rocketed. Being linked to John Wick piqued curiosity. Assassinated the Pope with John Wick? The rumor mill did the rest. He grinned. "Let's head back to New York. I've done this before. Been hunted." He tapped his chest. He'd been hunted by Maroney in Gotham. His early missions had mostly been about escape. "Take out the employer, and the bounty ends," he said. "Just don't kill him in the Continental," Li Ming added. John frowned. He knew the events that followed in John's own life. Killing Santino in the Continental violated the hotel's rules and sparked everything in Part 3. John would never let Santino get another free pass into the Continental. With Li Ming here, John thought Santino wouldn't get that chance. If Santino died, John's anger would ease. 2.5 months left. Li Ming could learn how John handled a rampage in that time. Then Li Ming got an unexpected system prompt. "Ding, Reincarnation Space has deployed Reincarnators in the current world. Current reputation, 100,056. Main quest rating A. Minimum mission requirements met. Early return possible. Abyss advises Reincarnators to return as soon as possible." Other Reincarnators? Li Ming was stunned. This world wasn't exclusive. The Reincarnation Space didn't usually deploy multiple Reincarnators so freely. The problem, he realized, wasn't the space, but the Abyss. From what he knew, the Reincarnation Space was like a nation, the space itself a whole entity, and other spaces or factions like officials and clans within it. The Abyss seemed ostracized, but it had given him privileges. Was it trying to use him as a card to change its fortunes? Maybe the Abyss had routed him into this world through a loophole. That would explain why it didn't want him meeting other Reincarnators until he was stronger. Ming tested things in his mind. If I stay, will the main quest change? Can Reincarnators detect if others are Reincarnators? No. If I don't return now, can I return later at any time? Yes. The Abyss immediately appended, not recommended. Li Ming considered his options and then thought, I won't reveal that I'm aligned with the Abyss. The Abyss fell silent. His mission interface updated. Completed. Can be submitted. Can return at any time. He understood then. The Abyss faction was likely being hunted by other factions. Reincarnators aligned with different sides could be at odds. Since he could return at will this time with no forced recall, Li Ming decided to stay and meet the other Reincarnators first. Get a sense of who they were. John, he said, let's wait before heading back. I want to find them. First come, first served, the rest would be guests. He had to give these newcomers a proper welcome. Chapter 56, Faction Confrontation Mission New York. Two teams appeared in the city one after another. Ding. Retrieving world list. Retrieval successful. World ID 24124. Other spatial links exist unexplored. Main mission, eliminate John Wick. Time limit, 30 days. Mission evaluation based on completion time. Pantheon faction effect activated. One item may be retrieved upon mission completion. An assassination mission. The speaker was a 2-meter-tall, broad-shouldered man of Chinese descent. Muscles rippled under his shirt, and he grinned grimly. I love assassination missions the most. Wang Hu, don't get careless. Beside him stood 2 men and 1 woman. The woman was lightly mixed race, with a striking face and an arresting figure. She smiled flirtatiously. Assassination jobs usually only give a few days. 30 days this time. The difficulty must be serious. Li, don't be scared. As long as there are no supernatural powers in this world, nobody can survive 30 days while we're on their trail. A young man in the group spoke up loudly. Don't worry about safety. I'll protect you. His eyes lingered on Luo Li's chest. His thoughts were obvious. Li Hui, Wang Hu snapped. His reprimand was less about discipline than about annoyance. Li Hui had stolen his thunder. Luo Li watched the 2 men bicker and smiled inwardly. The last member of their team was a lean, middle-aged man who had been silent since they arrived. He took out a set of instruments and began to work. Only when his devices registered did he speak. The current world's supernatural coefficient is 0, no danger. Lao Gu is as steady as ever, Wang Hu said, striding toward the street. Li Hui quickly stepped aside. Wang Hu was not only the team leader, but the group's only second-order reincarnator. His strength was considerable. Find out who John Wick is. He's apparently a tough target. Got it. Luo Li nodded. Across town, another portal opened and a different team stepped into the city. 3 Chinese men in their 30s had arrived. They immediately took up defensive positions and only relaxed after confirming their perimeter. Then the spatial prompt chimed. Ding! Retrieving world list. Retrieval successful. World ID 24024. Other spatial links exist, unexplored. Main mission, protect John Wick for 30 days. Mission evaluation will be based on John Wick's condition at the deadline. Heaven's Path faction effect activated. 5 main plot characters in the current world identified. Main character list: John Wick, Li Ming, Santino D'Antonio, Winston Scott, de Gramont. As each name was announced, images of the characters flashed into the 3 men's minds. This is bad. A protection mission, the youngest of the 3 said, worry creasing his face. And it's a faction confrontation mission, another added. Obviously the Pantheon team will be doing elimination. We already start at a disadvantage. He Zhang is right, the 3rd agreed. Enough complaining. The team leader cut them off. Ban Ping, you too, stop talking. No matter how much we grumble, the mission still needs finishing. Okay, boss. Understood, Captain. Hu Feiyang rubbed his temples. The team had been thrown together hastily, and the other 2 lacked initiative. Faction confrontation missions aren't a joke. If we fail, double points will be deducted. Check whether you even have that many points to lose. He Zhang and Ban Ping went cold. If they had plenty of points, they wouldn't have been forced into a temporary team. Both stiffened, mustering resolve. If they didn't have enough points, a failure would mean ruin. Hu Feiyang felt a little reassured, though his own worry remained. Protection missions were harder than assassinations. Reincarnators had countless ways to kill someone, but protecting a plot character meant defending against every possible threat and winning the target's trust. We must use our advantages, Hu Feiyang said. He began to outline a plan. Mission worlds are like films, clear protagonists, villains, and opposing forces. Our Heaven's Path edge is knowing the plot characters ahead of time. He Zhang, gather basic intelligence about this world. What major events are unfolding? Ban Ping, investigate these 5 characters, especially John Wick, where he is, who his associates are. I'll prepare weapons. He didn't need to ask whether the 2 knew how to gather intel. That was basic for Reincarnators. If they couldn't, they wouldn't have survived past missions. For the moment, everyone set to work. In Rome, night still held the city. After deciding to remain here, Li Ming received a prompt from the Abyss. Pantheon Faction Main Mission, Eliminate John Wick. Time limit, 30 days. Heaven's Path Faction Main Mission, Protect John Wick for 30 days. Pantheon Faction Reincarnators, 4 people. Heaven's Path Faction Reincarnators, 3 people. A word of advice from the Abyss, survive. Li Ming froze. Had the Abyss just shown him other factions' main missions? He knew the Abyss cared about his safety, but this was bolder than he expected. Main missions were supposed to be secret. Having advanced knowledge of the opponent's objectives would let him prepare extensively. If they want to assassinate John, Li Ming's mind raced. Never pick a fight with Batman, and I'm Batman's life mentor, he thought, already laying plans in his head. Lie, he's here. John's voice called to him. Li Ming steadied himself and walked toward John's room. When he opened the door, a hulking figure like an iron pillar filled the entry. An Italian-looking bodyguard who might remind one of Maroni. But Li Ming ignored the bodyguard and went to the sofa beside John, taking a seat. Li is here. What Li wants is what I want, John said to the middle-aged man across from him. The visitor had at first assumed Li Ming was one of John's subordinates, but John's words made him reassess. Li Ming smiled and offered his hand. Good evening, Mr. Luciano D'Antonio. The man studied him for a moment, then surprised Li Ming with an invitation. I wonder if you'd be interested in replacing Santino and becoming the head of the Camorra. Chapter 57, The Museum, 2 John Wicks. Luciano was stunned for a moment. After a long pause, he scoffed, trying to take back control. Your open bounty is already posted. 2 assassins wanted by the whole world. What right do you have to criticize the head of the Camorra? We may hold one of the High Table's 12 seats, Li Ming replied calmly, but Santino controls this region. He even killed his own sister. As far as he's concerned, kinship is meaningless. Your family isn't safer than ours. Luciano's face hardened. Li Ming had hit the mark. Still, he was a veteran. He quickly smoothed his expression. You're saying you want to kill my nephew, Santino? You want my help? Luciano retorted, lifting his wine glass and taking a sip. Li Ming raised one finger and shook his head with a small smile. It's not about us asking you for help, Mr. D'Antonio. It's about us offering to help you. You're being overshadowed by your nephew. That can't be pleasant. Luciano studied him. What do you want? An alliance, Li Ming said, sitting up straight. You give us support and we'll help you remove Santino. Why don't you just submit to me? Luciano asked. That's not an option, Li Ming said with amusement. At worst, John and I can hole up in the Continental. With our gold, we can stay safely hidden for a year, eat different dishes every day, and enjoy ourselves. But can you survive under Santino for that long? He let the question hang. Then he added, almost casually, you could also hide in the Continental, but then your influence will be eaten away by Santino. That's no different from being dead. Luciano fell silent. He knew Li Ming was right. Under Gianna, he could have lived in peace, but with Santino in power, everybody knew Santino was a madman. How do you plan to do it? He asked finally. Li Ming outlined the plan. He wanted to use Luciano's reach and resources to track the reincarnators, make them easier to find and control, so Li Ming could carry out his strategy. Luciano had been chosen deliberately. The D'Antonio family was large and influential, and Luciano, as Santino's uncle, still held sway. Santino's murder of his sister had sown panic through the family. People expected Santino would turn on other relatives to expand his power. At the end of the conversation, Li Ming smiled and teased. By the way, once Santino is dead, you won't put a bounty on John and me, will you? Luciano's face regained its composure. It wouldn't matter. We've already killed the Pope. Killing another Camorra leader is nothing to us. Li Ming shrugged, speaking with practiced indifference. The remark showed its effect. A flash of fear crossed Luciano's eyes. He quickly swore he wouldn't place a bounty. What was the prestige of the Camorra compared to his life? Is this alliance really necessary? John asked after they parted. We could take Santino ourselves. I never doubt our abilities, Li Ming thought, watching John, the man who solved problems with force and clarity. But you need backing in this world, connections, intelligence, resources. After Santino falls, we'll still be hunted by the Camorra. This clears our future trouble. John absorbed that and, for the first time in a long while, smiled. With Luciano's support, they'd have people, weapons, and information, Everything needed to kill without leaving a trail of reprisals. In the films, John had never faced an enemy so well-resourced. The next morning, Ming and John slipped out of the Continental through a secret passage and boarded Luciano's plane to New York. It was early in the city when they arrived. With cover and careful planning, no one detected their trail. Cassian, who had been staking out New York for half a day, was surprised when no one reported John's movements. Then the intelligence came in. "Santino is at the museum," an agent reported. "Mr. Wizard asked us to watch for anyone asking about the assassin world. We picked up 2 men with Chinese features asking about you and Santino yesterday afternoon," the officer added. They looked unfamiliar with New York. Some of the people they questioned, appearing as civilians, were actually Continental assassins in plain clothes. Ming smiled thinly. The civilian face of the assassin world was not one to be trifled with. Among them could be another John Wick who did not flinch at gunfire. He ordered, "Put out word that John is in Central Park. See how they react." Ming wanted a diversion, a smoke bomb, to draw the Reincarnators out and let the factions find each other. He wasn't sure whether the 2 newcomers were coming to kill John or to protect him. For the moment, identifying the Reincarnators and gauging their strength came second to the mission at hand. He and John armed themselves and slipped into the museum through a service tunnel. They could wait on the strange newcomers later. John was impatient. Santino was hosting a reception at the museum as the new head of the Camorra. The place was crowded with guests. John moved through the throng, keeping his approach slow and steady. Santino hadn't expected him to arrive so quickly. He'd seen John in Rome just yesterday, and he had been kept in the dark about any threat. When Santino caught sight of John, his face went white. The crowd's attention snapped to them. When they realized who had confronted Santino, the guests fell back, clearing a path for the 2 men. John drew his gun and fired at Santino, but the man wore a bulletproof vest. John didn't hesitate. He pivoted and headshot several bodyguards who were moving to intercept. Santino bolted. John chased him, cutting down anyone who tried to stand in the way. Santino ran like a man desperate to save his own skin, calling for backup at the top of his lungs. Reinforcements stalled John briefly, but then Ming appeared, rushing into the fray. Ming's speed of fire was terrifying. His shots were precise and brutal. He executed the Mozambique drill with machine-like efficiency, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head, neutralizing attackers before they could react. He fought as if wearing John's movements like a template. The John Wick combat template guided his rhythm and timing. Every pull, every stance carried John's shadow. The sight of 2 men fighting in the manner of John Wick sent Santino into full panic. He ran through the crowd and shouted for help at the top of his lungs, voice cracking. "There are 2 John Wicks in the museum. I'm not joking." Chapter 58, Wang Hu's terrifying strength. John and Ming chased Santino through one exhibition hall after another, but Santino's hired guards were being cut down with alarming speed. Santino, hiding in the twisting corridors, kept asking himself why his reinforcements hadn't arrived yet. He'd known John would come for him when he held the gala, but he hadn't expected the backup to be late. Ming was impatient too. He'd never intended to kill Santino outright. His plan was to keep Santino alive as bait, to let the Reincarnators who were coming to assassinate John stumble into a surprise. But the Reincarnators hadn't appeared. Had they missed the message? Or were 4 of them really unable to handle these 3? Before he could figure it out, a series of violent bangs echoed through the hall. A hulking figure slammed through a wall and strode into the room. A grotesquely oversized greatsword swung across his back. He stood over 2 meters tall, wearing a leather jacket and staring into the carnage. His left shoulder and chest were split open in a massive wound, but the injury was visibly knitting itself back together. The assassins panicked and opened fire, but to their shock, the bullets made almost no difference. One round lodged in the newcomer's forehead, and then, impossibly, was squeezed out, so the metal clinked onto the floor and clattered away. No one dared move. That newcomer was Wang Hu. He had taken his team to intercept John after receiving intelligence that John would be in Central Park, but instead they'd run into Reincarnators from the Heaven's Path faction. The 2 sides had opposed objectives. and the meeting quickly turned into a brutal engagement. Wang Hu had walked away with fresh wounds after fighting a Tier 2 Reincarnator. His teammates had kept the enemies occupied while he tried to close and finish the mission target. He hadn't planned to bother with the minor shooters. Then someone had actually picked a fight with him and hit him dead on. Wang Hu responded like a force of nature. He roared, charged the nearest shooter, and his sword sliced a man in half. He threw the greatsword into a dense cluster of attackers, severing one arm and pinning another against the concrete wall. Then he grabbed the nearest assassin and grimly ripped their hands from their sockets. The hallway became a tableau of blood and broken bodies. John, who had seen a lot in his life, swore under his breath. He and Li Ming slipped back into the shadows. "We can't go in yet," Li Ming warned. "He's not normal." John nodded. He was not reckless. He and Li Ming drew their heaviest shotguns and watched. Wang Hu had intended to use sheer brutality to intimidate everyone into submission, a tactic that had worked for him in other worlds. But here, it backfired. The assassins fought harder and more skillfully than he expected. Bullets were constant, precise, and powerful, and though Wang Hu's body healed, the punishment was mounting. He grabbed his greatsword to charge forward, but every step was answered by a hail of fire that pushed him backward. The wounds that had been closing began to fester under the constant barrage. Parts of his flesh swelled and mutated. The changes were ugly and sudden, like something out of a survival horror game. Li Ming glanced at him, thinking of the tyrant monsters from old video games. The viral infectivity had been stripped away, but the bloodline still conferred monstrous strength. Wang Hu swelled to over 2.5 meters, his muscles ballooning until he seemed almost twice the man he had been. Using his newfound size and the greatsword, he drove through the assassins and cleared the hall. But the mission still hadn't marked complete, and Wang Hu bellowed, searching the wreckage. "John Wick, where are you?" he shouted, mad with slaughter. A gunshot cracked from behind him. Even with his gargantuan strength, Wang Hu felt the sting. He turned and saw John standing there, Benelli raised. A second shot hammered into his side, Li Ming firing from another angle. The two of them circled him, blasting and retreating, keeping him off balance. A single 12-gauge slug could tear out a large chunk of his mutated flesh. It was the only thing that had real, immediate effect. Wang Hu swung his sword at John, but John's shot scored across his hand and interrupted the blade's arc. They kept moving, locking him down with twin shotgun blasts. "Shoot for the eyes!" Li Ming called. Vital points were the only viable targets against a regenerating behemoth. Bullets found a vulnerable spot. Li Ming's round shattered Wang Hu's left eye. He howled, clutching his face, and for a moment looked like he might break. Realizing he couldn't win a war of attrition in this place, Wang Hu made a decision to withdraw. He'd already fought the Heaven's Path Reincarnators and been bloodied. He had one last trick. With a flash, a battered silver-white armor unfolded from his personal space and cloaked his body. It was worn and pitted from many battles, but it absorbed the worst of the incoming fire. With the armor on, shotgun blasts no longer dropped him like they had, and he found the opening he needed. He charged through the big hole he'd smashed through on his arrival and vanished into the night. The two men in the corridor were left amid the stench of smoke and blood, guns still warm in their hands. Wang Hu escaped. Chapter 59. The nature of the game has changed. He got away. He did too. Li Ming was talking about the Pantheon faction's Reincarnator, and John meant Santino. "Santino must have gone to the Continental Hotel," John said quietly. John felt unsettled. His urge to kill had dulled. He couldn't imagine finishing someone off inside the Continental Hotel. "Let's go and block Santino first," Li Ming suggested. Agreed. Outside the museum, other reincarnators streamed in. The first to arrive were the three from the Pantheon faction. "Look at that hole. Was that Wang Hu?" the young Li Hui muttered. "Why isn't he answering in the team channel?" The three weren't badly hurt, but Heaven's Path operatives were holding them back. Maybe he went berserk. Only berserk would make him lose himself and stop responding, one guessed. Luo Li stared at the museum with worry, but hesitated at the entrance. She had the sense it was too dangerous and refused to go further. Lao Gu glanced at her and, sensing her fear, also hung back and watched the area. They were both afraid. "Why aren't you moving?" Li Hui pushed forward a few steps, then noticed he was alone and came back. The mission objective's inside. We go in, kill him, mission done. You actually want to complete the mission? Lao Gu asked. Of course. Li Hui's fists clenched. Wang Hu's strong, but after a big fight inside, he'll be vulnerable. It's the perfect time to strike. Luo Li's approving smile made Li Hui's chest warm. Then you go. Lao Gu motioned toward the side. Two people passed by. One of them was their target. Li Hui grinned. Don't move. Let me take him. Luo Li and Lao Gu exchanged looks, and without saying it, melted into the crowd. Li Hui disguised himself as a passerby, fiddling with a lighter as he eased toward John. Unaware of the attempt, John and Li Ming maintained a casual conversation, but their hands were already on their holsters. As Li Hui brushed past them, the lighter's flame suddenly shot up more than 2 meters, shaped and controlled like a predator about to strike. Li Hui thought he had the advantage, then Li Ming and John pivoted and drew. Bang! 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 Li Ming shot the lighter in midair and John fired twice, hitting Li Hui's shoulder and abdomen to pin him. A final, precise headshot from Li Ming ended it. Reincarnator Li Hui has died. Having seen mutated, monstrous reincarnators before, the lighter trick didn't surprise John. Li Ming, however, was slightly taken aback by the persistence of such an odd ability. Then the system pinged rewards. Ding, killed an enemy faction reincarnator. Ding, killed an enemy faction reincarnator. Chance to obtain 1 random item from the target's personal space. Obtained item, customized lighter. A dropped item? Li Ming inspected it. Customized lighter quality, common equipment holder. Li Ming effect, emits flames up to 3 meters. Cannot be upgraded. It was a mundane piece of gear, but Li Ming was more interested in the trigger condition. He picked up the actual lighter Li Hui had dropped and compared it to the one retrieved from the target's space. They were identical. Li Hui's entire personal space, it seemed, contained nothing more than that lighter. Poor kid, Li Ming muttered. Not every reincarnator in this round was a powerhouse. Some, like Li Hui, were ordinary people with a single inconsequential talent. After a quick sweep of the area with his gun, John pulled Li Ming toward the Continental Hotel. As I thought, a newbie who's only lived 1 life. He gets an ability and thinks he's invincible, Luo Li observed coldly from a distance. She couldn't care less about a dead sycophant. Lao Gu was equally indifferent. A team notification pinged in their channel. How did Li Hui die? Wang Hu asked. The death notification had snapped him back to alertness. Luo Li summarized the encounter. Wang Hu barely reacted when he heard that the killer had been the mission target. He had seen the target's power firsthand. Luo Li, use your charm to find another puppet. Ask about John Wick's enemies. We'll seek alliances, Wang Hu ordered. Also get us membership access to the Continental Hotel. It looks useful in this world. Lao Gu, fetch weapons. My autocannon was wrecked by that damned mage. Understood. Luo Li nodded and touched a man in a black suit who had drifted over, linking a faint pink thread from her fingertip to his head. Her charm spell surged into him. She could control his mind and make him answer. Who are John Wick's enemies? She asked. Many, the man stammered. Luo Li switched tactics. Where are John Wick's enemies? They're everywhere. Luo Li frowned. Who was their target if his enemies were spread worldwide? After reshaping her questions, she finally got the crucial information. Captain, John Wick's biggest current enemy is Santino. He's posted a global bounty. Santino is at the Continental Hotel in New York. If we want to find him, get a membership. Okay, Wang Hu replied. Go find Santino. Also, there was another killer with the target today. Who? A killer named Li Ming, Luo Li said with indifference. He's new to fame. People call him the Wizard. Rumor says he once set 20 or 30 people to kill each other. A reincarnator? Wang Hu asked cautiously. I checked. Li Ming's records go back to birth. He's native, not a reincarnator. Then we'll deal with him later. Wang Hu relaxed. Heaven's Path hadn't stolen the lead from them. On the Heaven's Path side, the mood was darker. Can we get into the Continental Hotel? Hu Feiyang coughed and clutched his chest. The scuffle with the Pantheon had left him badly wounded. He was still alive. He was a Tier 2 reincarnator, but the world was now hunting for them all. We can't get in. No one to help us, someone replied. We're wanted everywhere, He Zhong said, shaking his head. He and Ban Ping were uninjured but ashamed of Hu Feiyang's state. You were the first to run when the fighting began. Hu Feiyang spat blood and cursed between coughs. Do whatever you must, but get in touch with John Wick, he barked. Half their team's combat power was gone, and they hadn't even seen the mission target. The task, protect the mission objective for 30 days, suddenly felt impossible. Desperate, Hu Feiyang downed a potion, not sure if it would be enough. The nature of the game had shifted. The whole world was on alert. Alliances were recalibrating, and the Continental Hotel had just become the new center of the hunt. Chapter 60. Borrowing a Knife to Kill. A mage? Li Ming studied the intelligence file Luciano had sent. It detailed the fight in Central Park between the armored strongman and a staff-wielding mage, their blows, the shattered armor, the wind-sliced staff, the missile that tore through the mage's magic shield. Both had been badly wounded. In a world without visible supernatural powers, such a clash would attract dangerous attention. Fortunately, both combatants were reincarnators with secret methods, so neither had been captured for study. Still, Li Ming knew the appetite for magic, real magic, would only grow. If he didn't act fast, the storm of curiosity and exploitation would be inevitable. Better to deal with these reincarnators quickly before the world started asking too many questions. It was, he told himself, all for the sake of peace. Mr. Wizard, as you requested. Luciano's men set a metal canister on the table. It was about the size of a water cooler bottle. Nobody opened it. Li Ming smiled faintly. Finally, the canister held concentrated venom serum, something he had brought from the Gotham world and never had a chance to deploy. Since linking up with Luciano, he'd arranged to have it produced at a research institute. The timing couldn't have been better. Do you really practice witchcraft? Luciano's subordinate asked cautiously, having heard about the Central Park incident. If there were mages, maybe wizards also existed. Li Ming shook his head coolly. If I really practiced witchcraft, do you think Santino would have run straight into the Continental? The subordinate nodded and slipped away. No one needed to know more. Lee, something happened. John hurried over as soon as the man left. Jonathan, what now? Li Ming, who was often called Jonathan by his allies, didn't look surprised. That freak joined Santino. He's at the Continental. Really? John sounded unnerved, but Li Ming only gave a small, mischievous smile. Winston told me himself. Winston, manager of the New York Continental, saw everything that happened inside his hotel, and Winston was on John's side. Jonathan, let's go see him. They went. Li Ming's talk with Winston was brief. The manager issued a notice advising hotel guests to temporarily evacuate. The Continental rarely did that. When it did, it meant something serious was afoot. Most guests complied. A handful who had come to the hotel for refuge stayed locked in their rooms on Winston's advice. Only a small group remained in the bar. Winston, what are you doing? Santino demanded from his seat. Are you closing the hotel? No, a precaution. Winston glanced at Wang Hu and the two men flanking Santino. The one-eyed scar on Wang Hu's face was still raw. You have no idea what's coming for you, do you? Santino scoffed. John can only hide in this hotel. He's helpless inside. The moment he steps outside, everyone in the world will turn on him. Besides, I've got Wang now. He nodded at the scarred man. Because Santino had registered Wang Hu and his two companions as members, they were immune from outside interference while inside the Continental. That had been Santino's insurance. You stabbed the devil in the back and forced him into the life he had left. Now that he's free of the blood oath, you're afraid, so you found someone even more like a devil to handle him. Winston walked toward the bar steps and said to Santino, voice flat, "There's something you should know." Santino's face hardened. He knew Wang Hu had killed his men today. He knew Wang Hu was dangerous. But John was the greater threat. For now, he could accept a dangerous ally and deal with John first. Farewell, Santino, Winston said, and left. The farewell felt like a final warning. As Winston disappeared, Li Ming reached into his coat and drew the Gotham scepter. He pointed it at the man by Santino's side and called the skill, Wrath of Gotham. The target was one person, Wang Hu. Don't worry, I'm fine. I just need to kill John Wick, Wang Hu was telling Santino, trying to reassure him. Santino nodded and took a bite of duck. He dismissed his unease as Winston's old-fashioned fussing. Then without warning, everything changed. Boom. A sharp report, a flicker in the air, and Santino's expression flattened as pain cut through him. The next instant, he was gone. Wang Hu, what are you doing? Luo Li and Lao Gu screamed. A second ago, Wang Hu had been normal. Now he moved like a different creature. With one brutal strike, he snapped Santino's neck. From that moment, there was only one command in his head. Kill. Kill everyone. Wang Hu's body mutated. His arms thickened, muscles ballooned under his skin. His fists became the size of sandbags and swept toward Lao Gu. Caught off guard, Lao Gu barely got a partial barrier up. The punch hit like a battering ram, sending him flying and crashing through tables and chairs. His chest collapsed inward. He managed to pull out a potion and gulp it down, clinging to life by a thread. Wang Hu had lost any sign of technique. The nearer the target, the more brutal the attack. Luo Li, closest by, scrambled back. She cast charm spells, pleaded, tried to sway him, but nothing worked. He roared and charged like a human tank. Boom. Wang Hu smashed through the bar counter. Luo Li rolled clear, disheveled. She scrambled to her feet and from a personal space pouch produced a highly advanced shield generator she had won in Mission Worlds, a one-time use device she had been saving as a last resort. She tossed it at her feet and it blossomed into a protective dome. Luo Li, Lao Gu spat, furious that she'd shielded only herself. Wang Hu pummeled the shield, unable to break it. He whipped around and targeted Lao Gu again. Lao Gu, battered and desperate, sneered, "If it's like that, then we go down together." Wang Hu arrived in an instant. His oversized fist tore through Lao Gu's chest like a stake through paper. At the same moment, Lao Gu's final spell completed. Tiny black spots appeared on Wang Hu's massive hand. For a fleeting second, some fragment of awareness or pain crossed his features, and an unearthly wail burst from him. Ah! He howled, but the killing frenzy did not stop.